Hello there guys and welcome to another episode of Genuine Chit-Chat. This week I am again joined by Scott Weatherly of the 20th Century Geek podcast and Stories Out of Time and Space. So anyone who tuned into the last 2 weeks of Genuine Chit-Chat knows that myself and Scott spoke about the author H.P. Lovecraft, who is probably most famous for creating the creature called Cthulu and the whole mythos of Lovecraftian horror. So we spoke about that for like 2 episodes. That was nearly 2 hours worth of content. And then we were still talking. The whole conversation was like 2.5 hours or so. And the last 40 minutes of that was this part, which is all about Moon Knight. Now, Moon Knight is a Marvel character, and that's really all the information I'm going to give you because Scott very articulately goes through it all. One of the reasons I want to speak about it is because recently Oscar Isaac was announced to play Moon Knight in the upcoming Marvel Cinematic Universe Disney Plus TV series. I think it's coming out next year, or it might even be the year after that. I can never remember because Disney do so far ahead in all of their sort of releases and things. But in the next couple of years, we're going to get a Moon Knight live action TV series, and I knew almost nothing about Moon Knight, so I had a few questions for Scott, and he just talks about, who he is, where he appeared, what Scott kind of wants from the upcoming series, what makes Moon Knight different to other superheroes, lots of cool things like that. So it's a really good sort of entry into Moon Knight. And I know that Marvel Unlimited has quite a few Moon Knight comics and things as well. So if you do check out my Star Wars podcast and you listen to that and you check out any Star Wars comics on Marvel Unlimited, you can also check out some Moon Knight stuff as well. And also for clarity, this episode was actually up a week early on my Patreon. Whenever I release certain episodes that get split into 2 or anything like that, I generally release part 1 and part 2 as one episode on Patreon when part 1 drops on this normal feed. So if you want to get early access to most of my longer episodes by a week or 2, and also you want access to my Afterthoughts show that I do with my girlfriend Megan, who's been on Genuine Chit-Chat many times, where we talk about movies and TV series and things that we've watched, we release generally 2 episodes of that a week. And for today, on this release, The Big Lebowski is out, which Megan did not like. I really enjoyed it, but Megan was not a fan. And soon we've got Spider-Man 3 coming out, the Tobey Maguire one, which I'm very excited because it's half an hour long and Megan just tears it to shreds. So very excited to release that on Patreon and things. So if you want to go over to patreon.com/genuinechitchat, there's 2 episodes up completely for free right now, which is season 1 of The Witcher and our review of Star Wars The Phantom Menace. So go check that out. And then if you feel like it deserves it, you can contribute some money to the show and get all the extra content. Anyway, guys, that is enough from me here at the start. Make sure you give loads of love to Scott on social media and whatnot. And I'll be back at the end to give you guys information of what's coming up and more information on all the other things that I'm involved with. So there'll be a quick promo for the American Slacker podcast that I'll play. They were kind enough to play one of my promos on their recent episode, so I'd return the favour. And then after that, my conversation with Scott Weatherly about Moon Knight.
Hi, I'm Matt.
And I am Jesse. So, what is American Slacker, I guess, right?
The highest amount of dick jokes per episode per podcast.
We've been on the air for 57 straight years.
57 straight years of dick jokes.
Thing is constantly soaring over my head.
And you pulling my chain in your weekly weird news.
We're also cannabis friendly. We kind of sneak it in there, almost like you're lacing the brownies at the family reunion.
It's the ride of your motherfucking life.
Fucking 11 when there's only 10 on the dial.
Weapons of mass destruction.
It's a threat to society.
Food assaults.
Yeah, that happens too sometimes. An ostrich took a lit match into a fireworks factory.
I don't even know where to go with that one.
No, that's our 3rd story.
Oh my God. America, what are you doing?
So is someone dumb getting fucked over?
Well, they should have never gave raccoons rights, in my opinion.
Oh my God. You can help us. You can help everyone.
Download our shit now.
We're second America.
Welcome to Genuine Chit-Chat, where we have honest conversations with interesting people. And I'm your host, Mike Burton. So one thing I did want to ask you about then is I've got the 2 paths. I can ask you about Moon Knight or more about 2000 AD. I think I'll go with Moon Knight for now, and then maybe because 2000 AD is another one of those. Is another realm I want to delve into. Where I'm at the. I've consumed the MCU, and obviously I'm a massive Star Wars fan, everyone knows that, and then it's like, okay, then I want to get into some of the cooler stories in the MCU and things, but then I'm also trying to go off them the other way, which is the more, air quotes, intellectual stuff, Miracle Man sort of thing, basically anything with Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman to begin with, and 2000 AD is one of those things where The Star Wars author Cavan Scott, actually, he's quite active on Twitter, and he doesn't have too many followers, so I often tweet at him and he often responds, which is lovely. And he was reading, he always posts, he gets like comics every week, he loves Lego and stuff, which is quite cute, but he posted something about 2000 AD, and I tweeted him, I was like, oh cool, you read 2000 AD, that's really awesome, like my friends have. How long have you been reading? He was like, oh, since, I think he said either since the beginning or the last 40 years, but those two might be the same thing. Like, it's been going on.
Yes, 44 years this year.
Yeah, so I think he's basically been reading them for like ever, and I was like, I think 2000 AD is another one of those things where I would think maybe a whole podcast we could do about him after I've read a little bit, because it's once again, like, most people have heard of Judge Dredd in some fashion, but Judge Dredd, I didn't really realize until very recently, where it's like, oh no, Judge Dredd is one character in one anthology universe.
Yeah.
And there's so many, like, because I said to him, I was like, oh, what's your favorite part of it? And I think he said Rogue Squadron or Rogue Soldier or something on
Rogue Trooper,
there you go, that's the one. I think Dave mentioned that one as well. So there's so many things I want to delve into, but because we don't have a whole another 2 hours, or we do, but that'll take far too long.
One day. We will.
I want to go back Moon Knight a little bit, because
my boy, look at him over there, my boy.
I know, it's one of those weird things where some of my peripheral knowledge of comic book stuff comes from is because I used to collect Top Trumps a lot, and I was obsessed with them. I had hundreds of packs, and Marvel, there were like 3 packs of Marvel, so there's like 90 Marvel ones, same with DC. So I seem to vaguely recognize and know random characters, and I have like ideas of them on the basis of, oh, their intelligence is 7 out of 10. Well, they're smarter than this person, but they're not, and then they've got like one call it a paragraph on a card this big. It's really a sentence of describing them. And he's one of those things where I feel like if I got into him, I would love it. And I think you're the Moon Knight aficionado, and Superheroes for Dummies at some point, when they eventually do a Moon Knight episode, because sort of people voting, they want to get you on there. And I want to listen to that episode desperately. But until people vote on that, I'm going to say, for maybe the next, 15 minutes or so, I just want to ask about Moon Knight in general. Like, who the hell is he? Why do you like him so much? And tell me why someone should read Moon Knight, really. Because obviously Oscar Isaac, I think, is going to be Moon Knight.
He is.
Thing, which I'm very excited for, because I fucking love Oscar Isaac.
Oh, yeah. I can't wait. So excited. And it's also, it's got, and Ethan Hawke.
Really?
Is opposite him. Now, there was speculation of who Ethan Hawke could be playing, but we shall see. But Moon Knight. So Moon Knight is Mark Spector. And Mark Spector was a mercenary. So as much with the Marvel comic universe, people's origins get a bit mixed up and stuff like that. But they've all fought in different wars because of time moving. But basically, he was a CIA operative. He became a mercenary, and then in selling himself to whoever, worked for a person called Raoul Bushman, who had a sort of a big skull tattooed face and big sharp teeth. And they basically wanted that when conducting a mission, they then saw there was an archaeological dig, and they thought, oh, lots of money to be made from archaeological artifacts, especially in Egypt where they were. And so they went to attack this archaeological dig. Mark Spector steps up and says, no, that's wrong. These people are innocent. And Raoul shoots him, kills him, I should say, in quotation marks, and he falls dead, and they basically attack the camp. He is shot and killed at the foot of a statue of the Egyptian god Khonshu. He's the god of the moon, or the god of vengeance, or the god of the night walkers, depending on which run you read. But basically the foot of Khonshu. And Khonshu brings him back from death and says, you are now my avatar on earth. Go take vengeance. And so he comes back from the dead. He dons a white sheet that was just happily lying around. And he goes off and he sort of hunts down Bushman, and then that's his origin. And then he becomes Moon Knight back in New York. And it's almost like a redemption. The original this concept is him trying to redeem himself for his acts as a mercenary. That's the sort of canonical origin. There's a bit before that where he first appeared in Werewolf by Night 32, I think. Which I have got in the attic. I have got that. I've got his first appearance. Just to get that in there.
Just make sure. People know, guys listening, Scott has got his Moon Knight's first appearance. Just as a precursor to Superheroes for Dummies when he eventually goes on it. He is the aficionado.
Just I've got 2 of them. But that's before he became Biggie. I was getting them a lot cheaper than they're going for now. But basically, he appeared as a villain in Werewolf by Night. He was brought in by an organisation called the Syndicate to take on, and I love the fact they've got this, Jack Russell, who is the Werewolf by Night. Best name ever.
That is cracking.
And so he came in, he was donned in silver, and he fought the werewolf. And then in the second issue, he sort of turns on the Syndicate, helps Jack Russell escape, and then he goes off and he keeps the suit. And then he just started appearing in random issues. Like he appeared in The Thing, and so The Thing would have a sort of a meet with. He appeared in some Defenders issues in the 70s, and then Bill Sienkiewicz and Doug Monich got hold of him. Not Ron Perlman, but Doug Perlman invented him, created him. But then Doug Monich got hold of him and created this short run of stories that were backup stories for Hulk, the Incredible Hulk magazine, and they're called. Let me just check. Countdown to Dark. They're collected as, and they're sort of like they sort of collect like the first bunch of good stories of Moon Knight. And at that point, Bill Sienkiewicz's art is very sort of Neil Adams. It's really lithe and it's wonderful art, wonderful colouring as well. And then he got given his own run, and it went on from there. So that's sort of his opening. What is he though? Sort of, it's hard to describe. Basically, he wears all white or silver, depending on the thing. He has a moonish chest. He wears a hood and a mask, so he's got a really quite distinctive look, and he's got a really cool look. I really love it. And it's one of those where they've tried to sort of give him justification for wearing white. Like, yeah, he is Moon Knight, and so he sort of reflects the moon. But there was a run in the mid to early 2000s, I think 2004, 2005, with Sean Houston did it, and the opening arc of that is called The Bottom. And it's basically literally Mark is at the bottom of everything. Like he's lost everything, and it's about his comeback. But you find out the reason he wears white is because he wants people to see him coming, and that's what Oscar Isaac hashtagged when he sent that video out recently of him doing some fight training. He said hashtag the one you see coming, and that's how everyone's like, exciting stuff. So he is. The thing with me, like, he's aggressive, he's violent, like he may or may not be insane.
Now that's the thing the thing that intrigued me the most about him, because bluntly with the MCU, well, not MCU, with Marvel comics and DC comics, generally Marvel's a bit more quippy, generally DC's a bit more dark, but collectively it's still PG-13 superheroes in general, aside from a few exceptions, and they're quite interesting, most of them, but people wearing costumes beating up criminals and stuff, that has been done 1,000 times. But now I don't know if this is potentially some sort of vague spoiler or something, but am I right in thinking schizophrenia, the word, has been thrown around, or multiple personality disorder or something?
Multiple personality,
that's what I'm getting confused.
So basically, when he comes back from Egypt with his new girlfriend, Marlene, who was digging up the artifacts, she becomes eye candy. Like, she is literally there just to look pretty and get into trouble for the first couple of issues and stuff. She becomes a lot more important as the runs go on, and she's sort of like his anchor to reality later on, and they've had some really interesting relationships. But when he comes back, he creates these personas. So he is Mark Spector, the mercenary. So that's where all his fighting skills comes from, and he's sort of like, when we need to rely on that, he can do. But he's also rich. He's a mercenary, so he's got all this money. So in order for him to access high society and understand what's going on there, he creates a persona called Stephen Grant, who's well-to-do, and people accept him. But he also wants to know what's going on in the street. So he becomes a taxi driver called Jake Lockley. Now, to begin with, they are just personas, and they've all got their own little cues and different things. Like Jake Lockley has a mustache, and he hangs out at Gina's diner, and he has a street informant called Crowley. And over the issues, like, they are different personas. That's all. He just uses them to think. And then in the first run's 32 issues long, and then about halfway through that, all of a sudden, Marlene starts sort of saying to him, like, you can't talk to me like that. He's like, he's going like, look, listen, love, I'm off out in my cab. And she's like, well, when's Stephen coming home? He's like, I don't know. And he starts to realize that he's actually not personas. He's blending into these characters a bit too much. And they do start to address it. Like, is he all right, doing this? And that became his thing. Like, in that first run, they really do address, like, they come into this idea of like, these may not be personas, these may be distinct personalities. And the personality thing has been dropped and picked up and dropped again, and this other thing. But it's sort of the core of it is these four personalities. You've got Mark Spector, Steve Grant, Jake Lockley, and Moon Knight, and they mesh together to form this thing. And I love that really the most current run has really embraced that, like this idea that, like, no, they all exist in his head and he has to deal with that. And they've really thrown us for a loop over the time. I mean, unfortunately, like Michael Brian Bendis did a 12-issue run on it, which was terrible. It was done by, Maleev, the art, who did a lot of Daredevil stuff with Bendis as well. And
I've heard the name thrown around, but I cannot remember.
It's really beautiful to look at, but the story's crap. But instead of his usual personalities, he takes on the personas of Avengers. So he takes on like Wolverine, Spider-Man, and Captain America. It's interesting, but doesn't quite work. The best ones is when he's really sort of like, he is broken. Like, you know, because the other thing as well is Khonshu real. So Khonshu comes back. Not only has he got these other personalities, he has this being Khonshu, which brought him back to life. Now, for a long time, Khonshu was just the deity that he worshipped, or he was the avatar of Khonshu. And then eventually, sort of, Khonshu started to turn up and was like, "No, I'm a real being, and you need to do as I say." And it's also in Sean Houston's run, like that's the question: is this really Khonshu or is he crazy? And so he sort of hung around, and it was even sort of suggested at one point that Khonshu is a deity, but he's an interdimensional being. Like these other characters, these are the gods that exist in the MCU and all this other stuff. So it's never, ever been clarified. And Jeff Lemire did a really wonderful run, again, like a 12-issue run that just sort of really delved into this idea of split personality and his perception of reality and is he crazy? And what they did was that I really loved was as he slipped from personality to personality, they'd have a different artist doing it. So it was mainly drawn by Greg Smallwood, but then they'd have like other people come in and do these other personalities, and then he would literally fall from one to the other, and so it's really, really well done. And then Max Bemis did the most recent run a couple of years ago, and in that they had a storyline where Jake Lockley has had a child with Marlene, and all the other personalities don't know.
Oh, I see.
And so they're like, oh, and so Mark Spector finds out he's a father. But like, you know, how does he deal with that? And he's like, well, I'm biologically the father, but Jake Lockley's actually the father, and they dealt with that. And so there's just been this. Yeah, is he crazy? Yes or no? We don't know. When he's handled well, like Moon Knight is ace. Like he's really. There's a couple of runs that are just fantastic. When he's handled badly, it's terrible. There was a team up thing they did a while ago that was Doctor Strange driven and called Damnation, I think.
I've seen that advert. I was about to say Damnation because that's like quite a big event, wasn't it? Because it was advertised in a lot of my Star Wars comics.
Yeah. Don't bother. It's awful.
Oh, okay. I haven't read any Doctor Strange. So.
But the Moon Knight they have in that is akin to Deadpool. Like he becomes like the jokey one, and you're like, he's not like this ever before or since. So you know, you clearly don't get the character, or you wanted Deadpool and you weren't allowed him. So it's but when he's written well, like he is broken. Like Mark Spector is sort of one of these. He's one of these characters that keeps trying to do good, but you know, it never quite works out. Like he wins and he does stuff, but like he's not really welcome.
Yeah, what cost almost? Like, you saved the city, but you've actually killed 12 children in doing it, and then we're going to focus on that. Kind of like a simplistic way of looking at it.
Like he joined like the Secret Avengers, like Captain America when he was Commander Rogers brought him in to the Secret Avengers, but he was like, but you're not going to be a part of the real Avengers. Like you were in the 90s, but you know, we don't talk about that. And then in the Houston run, he goes up against one of his villains, Black Spectre, who's trying to become mayor of London. And eventually they come up like this like a rooftop fight. And Black Spectre's like, well, you can't kill me because I'm a public figure now. And if you kill me, they'll know you killed me. He's like, yeah, that's true. Throws him off the roof.
Amazing.
Yeah. And so there's an amazing issue during this run where it was during Civil War. And so there's a whole run of issues for all the different characters where they're being assessed as to whether or not they should be given a license to be a superhero. And they assess Moon Knight. And at the end of it, basically the guy who's assessing him comes out and he's like, I don't know what to make of this guy. Like he's clearly clearly crazy, but like he's directing it in a good way. And it addresses this thing. And eventually he sort of says, give me a license or not. Still going to do it. I'll happily take her. And he's basically challenging Iron Man to a fight. And you're like, yeah, this guy's nuts. You can't stop him. But he's a really interesting character. And he's been dealt in different ways. My first issues were the Houston run, and drawn by David Finch as well, who's awesome. Like, his art is incredible. And then I was in Whitby, and in a secondhand bookshop, and they had a bunch of comics, and there was like 20p each. I was like, ooh, flicking through, and there was like all these sort of it was a run from the early 90s called Mark Spector Moon Knight, and I grabbed a bunch of them. And then all of a sudden, that sort of set me off on sort of some obsession where I was like, I've got to have every issue of the Moon Knight runs now, and I've done it. I've got them all, and
one of the things about Moon Knight, one of the things that intrigues me a bit is because it's once again, it's obviously he's been in the Avengers to some amount, and he's been, you know, if he's in Civil War, he was addressed. So it's one of those things where he's kind of like, the word of the day, peripheral. He's like, he's a character that is known, but isn't that famous. Because like I vaguely heard of him, and I knew before. Obviously, that poster I can't see greatly, but I know what he'd look like. If I could draw, which I can't, I would be able to draw him or point him from like a lineup and things. But like, am I right in thinking he's never had like the big break? You know, Spider-Man's got a run at the moment, which I think is on its like 900th issue or 850th issue or something mental. Has been going on since like the 60s or something stupid. Yeah. But has he just had loads of sort of mid-size runs, like 12-issue runs, just every couple of years, someone picks him up, 12 issues, and then he disappears?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, he's had, the longest he had is a 60-issue run, which was the Mark Spector Moon Knight, which is a mixed bag at best. It's a representation of some. Chuck Dixon does a bunch of them, and so there's some really good writing, and then it becomes very, very 90s. Like all of a sudden, like he's wearing adamantium armor, and he has a tech, and it ends weirdly. It ends with his death. And this is another thing. Like the final issue, there's an artist called Stephen Platt who draws the last final issues. He was like a big deal in the 90s when art was like all king and Image were ruling the roost. It's awful. Like some of the art is dreadful, like Rob Liefeld sort of like level awful, but it was massive at the time. Anyway, they kill off Moon Knight, and then the story that brings him back doesn't explain how he comes back. They're just sort of like, oh no, you're back from the dead. All right. And they sort of accept it. And there's a 4-issue arc called the Resurrection Wars. And it's sort of like, yeah, you're back and you've got to do this thing, and off you go. You're like, oh wow, all right, fair enough. But that's the thing, like, it's sort of one of the great things about Moon Knight is he's never been one thing. He's got all these different runs, and he's never been like one thing. He's just adaptable, and he is crazy. Like it clearly is. Like he's never stood still. Warren Ellis did a wonderful 6-issue run. I know he's not exactly flavor of the month at the moment, but in that he introduced a new character called Mr. Knight, where basically it's Moon Knight wearing a hood over his head and a all white suit.
Okay.
And he basically turns up, and that's like that's his detective persona.
I see.
But he's also kick-ass. Like there's an issue in that run. It's only 6 issues where a girl has been kidnapped in this building. Have you ever seen The Raid?
Oh, I love that film. Both of them. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So think the first film, right, in comic form, in 22 pages.
That sounds mental.
It is. He literally turns up, and so Moon Knight turns up in his limousine, his self-driving limousine, leans out, and then basically just sort of starts a fight on the doorstep, and it follows him up to the roof to save this girl. And eventually, sort of the end of the issue is him fighting this guy on the roof, and the guy's like, you've run out of weapons and all this other stuff. So he uses his mooncopter to crash it into the building to kill this guy. It's ace.
Extreme. Yeah. It's one of those things with a lot of characters where, like, it's my biggest. I've been on record saying this before, and I haven't had any shit for it, fortunately. But like, I say, I'm not a big fan of Superman generally because for me he's boring, because it's just, well, he's a god, he's invincible, so there's no stories you can write apart from Kryptonite, something about Lois Lane or People in Danger. But then people have since said to me, yeah, there are a lot of crap Superman runs, but all the best ones are ones that are him dealing with the fact that he is basically a god among people. And obviously that's kind of like Miracle Man. I assume it's a lot of,
similar thing.
Yeah, it's that sort of a lot more darker and a lot less glossy. And I think that's what intrigues me about, because while I'm trying to get into the realm of comics and things, like I will read the top tier Batman, like when the DC Infinite eventually comes out in summer, I think, because I've got Marvel Unlimited and I've got, I buy all the Star Wars comics because I'm a nut. And it's just like, with that, it's like, I'm going to cherry pick some certain stories. I've got a few Batman comics and stuff that are quite cool, like Hush and some of the New 52, and might have been lent, Dark Knight Returns. There's big pillar stories, and I know that All-Star Superman's one that people keep telling me to read as well. So I'm going to read some of the, the big pillar names of certain comics because I want to. But like, I don't want, not to downplay anyone who has their favorite hero as Superman or Batman or anyone like that, but it's just like, they don't interest me in the same way because Batman's a little bit more complex, but you generally know what you're getting. And I don't actually want that. Like, I like stories, and that's why some of the things with some of my big problems with a lot of the Star Wars comics is that the main run of Star Wars comics, the first one went on for like 75 issues. I personally was reading it, and I gave up like years ago. I only picked them up again because I've been doing a Star Wars podcast, and so I've been recently rereading them, and I'm like, okay, when I read it now, I can see some of the connections and stuff, and because I'm analysing it, it's more enjoyable for me to read now. But it's just like, apart from the Vader stories, there's so many random stories of Star Wars that are really cool, but they're the ones that you wouldn't expect to be good because they've got no attachment to everything else. And I quite like the idea of Moon Knight and some of these other characters. Like, I want the more complex, dark issues. I don't want to see someone who is really cool who can beat the shit out of anyone, because you can read literally millions of comics. Like, if I wanted that, I'll just read every Spider-Man comic there's ever been, and I'll be happy until I die and still not have read them all. But I don't want that. I want a character who is complex, and there's that. I like the extremes of humans in a sense, and it's kind of what we're saying, with Miracle Man and what you've kind of been saying about with Lovecraft. In a way, it's that weird, how far can you push the boundary of humanity in a sense? And from what you've been describing Moon Knight is because there's the ambiguity of who the fuck he is in the sense of like, what's his core character? Batman is, his parents are killed, he's really dark, he doesn't generally kill. That's really Batman in a nutshell. But with Moon Knight, because he hasn't been popular enough to have the one core thing, so they keep changing and tweaking it, I am intrigued to get into that realm.
Oh yeah, no, that's the thing. I mean, you say about the Batman. If you just look over there, you can just see this here. I had a piece of art commissioned.
Oh, that's amazing.
Which has got a little version of the kiddie version of Batman and Moon Knight. It says copycat. It says you wish. It is, people say that he's just Marvel's Batman. Like, no. He is so much more complex than Batman. Like, I think Batman's become boring in these days. And I love Batman. Like, I really do. I think there's some wonderful and amazing classic tales. But I do think he's become very generic. And like I said, the thing with Moon Knight is it keeps changing. And the thing is as well, like, they push the barrier. Like, Moon Knight is killed, and he's had to deal with that. Like the Raoul Bushman, the start of The Bottom, there's this run that Houston did. I don't want to spoil it. It doesn't spoil because it's well known. But basically, Bushman kept pushing him. Imagine like if Bane, when Bane comes to fight Batman, right? And Batman's like, I can't take it anymore, and he ends up breaking his back. Because again, like, so Batman does everything he can, but he can't kill. Like, that's his rule, right? That's not a problem for Moon Knight. Like, they push him all the way, and so Moon Knight pushes Raoul Bushman off a roof. Well, basically, him and Bushman off a roof down a fire escape. And when they land on the floor, to make sure he's dead, he cuts his face off.
Jesus.
And then he retires. Like, he quit because his knees are all mashed up, and the bottom is about him coming back. But there's a moment in that when he's caught looking in the mirror wearing Bushman's face. And like that's in a Marvel comic. Like, there's a picture of him wearing human skin, of someone else's human skin, and then he has to explain it to his girlfriend. And you're like, yeah, this isn't right. Like, there's a reason this guy's not allowed to do, It's that sort of thing of like, he's just so much more complicated. And again, like you say about his personality disorder, sort of this, they've really addressed it. Jeff Lemire started to address it they had these flashbacks to his childhood, and you find out that his dad, so the other thing is he's Jewish, like Mark Spector's Jewish, his dad's a rabbi. And so they've involved that element as well. So that's been really interesting. But they find out that his dad had a mental illness, now an underdiagnosed or indeterminate mental illness, but depression was definitely part of it, as they acknowledge. So there's this question then of like, okay, is there a genetic element? Like, not saying that there is, but that's raised in the comic of like, and Mark questions that. It's like, well, all right, was I always destined to be this? And he can't, he can't answer that question. But they find this thing when he's a kid that he starts talking to an imaginary friend, and the imaginary friend starts talking back, and you think it's another kid, and then you see another scene where it's Mark talking both parts back to his dad, and his dad's like, "Oh no, like this is what I've always feared," sort of thing. And it's really sad. And then he tries to get in the army, and he can't do it, and it's sort of all of a sudden this failure pushes the Mark Spector personality aside, because he can't deal with it, and this other one comes in. So you find out it's actually come before. And so this thing of becoming Moon Knight and then the introduction of the personas is what triggers it again. So, I dealt with that, but now this other event has kicked it off again, and it gave you more of that. And you're always wondering, like, well, what actually really triggered it? And again, in the Max Bemis run, they've now introduced it and gone back even further and said, well, there was actually this traumatic event that happened that actually may have triggered this, this trauma is what triggered him, this thing he couldn't deal with that he's now had to deal with. So it's been really interesting, and he is a fascinating character because other people, there was he appeared in in a Punisher comic recently, and there's an exchange which you sort of go, I can't believe they did this. It's good, but basically he turns up to, they don't like each other. Moon Knight and Punisher have always been a bit combative, and Punisher sort of says, all right, Moon Knight's still crazy, and Moon's like, yeah, Frank, still homicidal, yeah. And then basically, I think Punisher says, how's the imaginary moon deity? Fine. How's the dead family? And Punisher's still dead. And you're like, I thought this was a joke panel, and I'm like, no, this is a panel from a Marvel comic.
It's incredible. And I know time is starting to run out. So we'll start to wrap up. But I've got two more quick questions about Moon Knight because, and then we'll be off. I'll probably split this into 3 podcasts. Huzzah.
I'm so sorry.
No, don't be, because it means that I don't have to panic and try and, quickly record with someone because, occasionally guests drop, which is fine. But sometimes you've got like 2 weeks and you're like, shit, I've got nothing coming out. So this will do nicely. I was going to say is, first of all, do you know the first general decade that the Moon Knight came out?
70s. 74, 75, something like that.
So do you think that because I know Fight Club was a book first by Chuck Palahniuk. Do you think Moon Knight because how you described it, without spoiling, well, I mean, Fight Club's been out for ages, but people should fucking know by now and whatever. But in Fight Club, something happened, split personality stuff. It's like, do you think that was kind of like Moon Knight? Like, or do you think it's just a weird coincidence? I think it's a bit of a coincidence. I also think multiple personality disorder was a bit of a hot topic in the late 70s, early 80s. Okay. There's several books, even from the early 80s. Like I'm reading The Exorcist at the moment, for its 50th anniversary, and it's discussed in that. So it was one of those disorders that I think was in the zeitgeist, I think, around that time. I see. That's cool. And the last other thing is going to be about the series coming out. What would you actually? I assume you know a small amount, but like, what do you want from the series? Like, what kind of Moon Knight? What would you hope if it's going to be? I don't know. Is it going to be like a limited series? Is it going to be an ongoing series? How do you want them to play Moon Knight? I
think it's going to be limited. I mean, the thing is, when I was watching, when Netflix had them and they were doing Daredevil, Punisher,
and I'm rewatching Daredevil. I actually, about 5 minutes before you start recording, Megan's never seen them, so I was like, oh. So we watched series 1. I was like, I can't wait for series 2 because when he interacts with Punisher, someone who won't kill, to someone who constantly kills, I love the dynamic. And I never watched series 3, so
it's good. Yeah,
I know. I've heard it's good. I was watching it with a mate of mine, and then the pandemic happened when we were kind of catching up. So anyway, but yeah, sorry.
So when I was watching those, I was very much like, this is the tone I want. Like, this is, so watching sort of that Daredevil and that Punisher and
that Punisher series,
Jessica Jones.
It's excellent.
Yeah. So that was very much, I was like, oh, this is the world it's got to be in. And I was of that. I was like, it's got to be like this. It's got to be R-rated. It's got to be violent and all this other stuff. And then knowing that the MCU is going to be PG-13, like, yes, they're going to give Deadpool its thing, but that's a different thing entirely. And I don't think, Moon Knight doesn't have the cachet to be able to carry that off. So I'm accepting that it's going to be in a PG-13 world. And that's fine, because you can push certain barriers and that sort of thing. So what do I want? I want them to maintain the mercenary element. I'm glad Oscar Isaac is in it, because I think, I'm glad they haven't just gone for muscly white guy sort of thing.
Yeah, and he's probably, I'd say Oscar Isaac is one of the best actors of the last 5 to 10 years, because every single thing I've seen him, obviously he's good in Star Wars, but like Ex Machina, Inside Llewyn Davis, like every time I see him in anything, whether or not I know he's in it, he steals the show. He's such a phenomenal actor.
Well, the fact that they chose Oscar Isaac and he's such a versatile and such a talented actor tells me, or at least I'm hoping, that they will address in some capacity the multiple personality disorder and mental illness. I think if you're going to have an actor of that caliber, then and Ethan Hawke as well. So you've got Ethan Hawke, and I also think it's good. I'm hoping that they have that. Maybe Ethan Hawke will be Khonshu. I don't know. Or he had a brother called Randall Spector who he killed pretty quickly. So I'm hoping that they address some of that. I want it to be dark in the sense, and I don't mean dark as in sort of like goth. I want it to be sort of dark in that sense of like Mark Spector's not a good person at the heart of it. Like he wants to be, but he's not. Like, he's always got this thing of like, he will always fall back on violence. He will always fall back on that, that element of himself. And I want that to be addressed as well. And I'm hoping they include some of I just want the costume to be iconic. Like, I'm not too bothered how they do it, because he's had so many different costumes. But I want it to be at least white or silver. I want it to have the hood. I want it to have the specific type of cape, that sort of thing. But generally, I'm fine with it. But I think because Moon Knight has never been, as you said, doesn't have like a core thing that's going to be addressed. I think, and WandaVision was great. I love them. Falcon and Winter Soldier is shaping up to be pretty good fun. I'm enjoying that. I'm hoping, like you say, I've got faith that they'll do something good, and I'm open to be going, yeah, show me what you want to tell me. I'm not expecting him to cut anyone's face off. I'm not expecting him to start throwing, moon darts at people or doing whatever. But I'm expecting him to be violent. And I'm expecting to an extent, and I'm expecting him to address certain mental illness issues. I think that sort of around that personality disorder or stability issues. I think that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, that's what I kind of hope as well. Because when I heard of the series, I was excited for you, because I was like, oh shit. Because now it's kind of like, there's always that thing with me where it's like, because I'm so interested in relatively everything, and I know you've got a similar thing because you've just got such a wide berth of things you're interested in. There's not enough time in the day to absorb everything. But when there's like a series that comes out and it's like, oh, there's going to be a Moon Knight series, next year or the year after, you go, okay, well, really, that's kind of the nice kick up the bum to go, in the next 2 years, I want to consume some Moon Knight, rather than it being that sort of ethereal, I'll do it at some point. You know what I mean? Like, I really want to read Sandman. It's meant to be phenomenal, but there's no timer. I could read that now. I could read that in 10 years. Obviously, everyone who reads it goes, you need to read it now, but everyone says that about everything. But I'm just excited because I thought WandaVision, we're not going to get into a whole MCU thing, but like, I thought WandaVision was cool. I thought the end was a bit flat, but generally speaking, it was cool and different. Falcon and the Winter Soldier, better than I thought it was going to be so far. Especially what they're doing about race, which is quite interesting. I didn't expect them to go that route, but it's a very interesting way. And what I'm hoping is basically the MCU movies are going to be the big, not very risky, just, standard movies. It's probably, Black Widow's not going to be the best film ever. It's probably not going to be crap though. It's going to be okay. It was going to be good. 7 out of 10, just a standard. This was pleasant to watch, not my favourite. What I'm hoping they do is that with the series, they get weird and different. They've got a She-Hulk series, which I don't think anyone saw coming. They've got Moon Knight. And I think with what Guardians of the Galaxy and Ant-Man showed especially, was that as long as you've got someone good writing it and good people involved, it doesn't really matter who the character is, because you can make it good if you're faithful to some degree and you make it in the right way. No one thought, if you said to people in the 90s, oh God, they're going to make a Guardians of the Galaxy movie, people would say, that is going to be the worst thing in the world. No one's going to watch it. It's going to destroy the MCU. It's like one of the most popular fucking films of the MCU. It's like the most mainstream favourite film of the sort of MCU. And it's like, that's fine. Try and use that in the series. I want the series to get weird. I want the series to experiment.
I think they will. I think what they're going to do is, I think that, they're not daft. I mean, so final thought. They're obviously leading up to Doctor Strange 2, which is going to be called The Multiverse of Madness. And I think
about that.
Yeah, and it's been directed by Sam Raimi. Like, this is so awesome. Like, really excited by that. That's going to be mental. But I also think with things like WandaVision, they took a risk, but they took a risk with characters that we knew and So both from the films and from the comics, everyone's like, oh yeah, we know WandaVision, we know they have a relationship, and they did it in a very specific way. Took a risk because it could have gone pear-shaped. Everyone could have watched the first 2 episodes and gone, this is pants and I'm out. But they didn't. Everyone remained invested and it worked. And I think they keep trying to test things, and I think they're doing something similar with Falcon and Winter Soldier. They're doing like a buddy cop show, basically.
Yeah.
And they're going like, well, if this works, we can do other things. And I think they are. They're going to keep testing the water. And Loki comes out. That's got time travel and alternate time streams.
It's alternate Loki, isn't it? You watch the trailer. It's like, because obviously, spoiler alert, Loki dies in Endgame, and then it's like, but in Infinity War he dies. But then it's like it shows you in Endgame they go back in time, fuck something up, and one of the Lokis disappears. And I forgot about that. But a friend of mine, Tonya, she heard about the Loki trailer and she immediately went, "Oh, that's gonna be that Loki went back in time in Endgame, isn't it?" And I was like, I completely forgot about him. And then the trailer it confirmed. So yeah.
So they're now going to do alternate time mapping and other dimensions, and you go, right, they are setting you up for the weirdness.
Mm-hmm.
And so if the audience goes with them, and that'll be with Doctor Strange too, you might get a fourth wall break in She-Hulk like we had in the 90s and this other thing. You might get Moon Knight talking to a version of himself, or a bird skull headed god. You might get something weird. I think they're shaping you up to go, how far can we push the weirdness now? Let's see what we can do. And they're testing the waters. And if people have gone with it, right, let's really push it out. Let's see what they can do. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be ace. And news is there's going to be a new Moon Knight series in July, so I'll be shaping up to get that as well. So yeah, no, all Moon Knight all the time is what I want.
Well, that's wonderful. Yeah, well, what I'll do is when I've finished Miracle Man, obviously I'll let you know and all that sort of jazz. But yeah, I'm definitely going to contact you and get some details for Moon Knight and things. And is there just so I can put it in the notes and things? Is there any is there a starting point? Would you say chronologically just start at the early Moon Knight and go through, or is there sort of specific series you think could stand out?
At the moment, they do the complete collections.
Yes.
So that Marvel have released the complete collections. There's 3 volumes of that. From a paperback point of view, cheaper version, I would say if you can. There's no real point. Like you say, it chops and changes that much. Probably one of the best ones to start with is the Warren Ellis run. Mm-hmm. It's called From the Dead. So it's called Moon Knight From the Dead by Warren Ellis, and that runs through. It's got Colin Bunn and a bunch of other writers after that are really good as well. So that's a good starting point.
Wonderful, cool. Well, when I eventually get onto that, I will let you know. And then whenever Comics in Motion, we seem to be doing watching of every conceivable series on the planet. And so when Moon Knight happens, I'll make sure to be saying, guys, let's reserve it. Scott, you can be the Moon Knight guru. Well, that is absolutely wonderful. We've been chatting now the recording. This one recording is 2 hours, 20 minutes. Off air, we've been chatting for nearly 3 hours, which I feel like we probably could easily chat for more. But for our own sanities and probably our families, we should probably stop. So tell everyone. I'll be obviously putting the links in the description to all 3 of these things, but tell everyone where they can find you and plug as much as you would like.
Okay, well, the 2 main things, obviously, is big podcast is 20th Century Geek, which you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, social media, all over the place. Just look for @20th Century Geek. I also do a sci-fi movie review podcast with the fantastic Julian Darius. That's called Stories Out of Time and Space, and we are on Twitter @PodTimeSpace. And if you want to come for just find me and tell me why I'm wrong about something, or why you want to support Lovecraft or Moon Knight or that, you can find me @Scott Weatherly. Also on Twitter.
Wonderful. And if you love him a lot, he's got a Patreon, so make sure you go support him.
I do. Yeah, go support me. That's Patreon. Just look for 20th Century Geek. I'm on there.
Yeah, I'll include links in the description, so all that sort of stuff. So it's been absolutely wonderful, Scott, and it's times like this where I think I need to have you on the show more often, because we could just talk about anything. That's the crux is that we tried to talk about Lovecraft once, so we got so sidetracked to talk about something else for 2 and a bit hours, and then we talked about Lovecraft. It was like, let's talk about Lovecraft for 2 hours, Moon Knight for another one. So that's absolutely wonderful. So I'll stop it here before we get onto some other amazing hits. So thank you so much for coming on, Scott.
Thank you, Mark. As always, it's an absolute joy, so I appreciate it.
And that's the end of the podcast. Thanks as always for tuning in, guys. As I said at the start, this episode, as well as the other parts that I did with Scott Weatherly, were released on Patreon a week or 2 early. So if you want future early access to some of the longer conversations that I have, make sure you check out Patreon. So what have we got coming up then? So next week is going to be, once again, another two-parter. It seems like recently all the episodes I've been doing have been really long episodes. So I was speaking with a gentleman named Tom Everett. Now, he is an actor. He's done a bit on stage and a little bit in film and things. And we just had a really cool conversation about, we were meant to be talking about acting and things like that, but I think we ended up just kind of talking about his time as a tour guide, which was quite an interesting discussion, how his skills sort of translate into acting. But then he said that one of his favourite podcasts of mine was the Good and Evil podcast I did with Jack Thomas of the Just Conversations podcast, where we spoke for like 2 and a bit hours about the concept of good and evil, and we did quite a deep dive into sort of morality and that sort of thing. And Tom Everett quite liked that, so we ended up just talking about that sort of thing. I'm pretty certain that we spoke about sort of morals and moral ambiguity and sort of religious entanglement with morality and things. So I can't 100% remember the entirety of the conversation because it was quite a long one again, but it is going to be split into 2 parts, which means that all of you guys who are listening on the regular feed, you'll get part 1 next week, and then you'll get part 2 the week after that, whereas all Patreons will get access to the full unsplit episode next week. And also for any Patreons, when an episode gets released here on this feed that they already have access to, that's when I release an episode of Afterthoughts on that feed, but I also release, an extra episode or 2 of Afterthoughts each week anyway. So if you did want to support the show for £2 a month or $3, I think it is, which is, a few loaves of bread, which is what I said last week, which I thought was quite funny. If you want to support the show for the equivalent of a couple of loaves of bread per month, then you will get access to several hours of early access content, as well as about anywhere between 20 and 40 minutes of extra content per week, which translates to, about 2-3 hours of content extra every month. So you get that amount of content. We do, TV series, film reviews. We've been going through the Spider-Man films recently, which Megan has not been enjoying that much, if I'm being honest, because she loves Tom Holland's Spider-Man and doesn't really like Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man or Andrew Garfield's one for that matter very much. But it's quite fun because there's loads of episodes already on there. So if you became a Patreon supporter now, you would get access to hours and hours of content. We've done Little Miss Sunshine. We've done reviews of documentaries like Murder Among the Mormons. We did The Queen's Gambit, The Witcher. We recently watched Tangled for the first time in ages, so we're probably going to do a little afterthoughts on that. So we try and do quite a wide berth. We also do 27 Dresses, Knocked Up. There's some chick flicks that we do. There's some Marvel films that we do and superhero stuff. We try and do quite a wide variety. And each week I release 2 episodes. I try and have one episode being either Star Wars or superhero related, and then one other episode not about that at all. So if you don't even like that sort of thing, there you go. I also post other photos and things. There's videos of my tortoise on there and photos, and I'm trying to do like sort of Funko Pop Fridays and things where I take photos of some of my Funko Pops on Fridays and whatnot. There's lots of different bits and pieces. If you don't want to financially reward me and you just want free stuff, go over there anyway, because you can listen to Star Wars Phantom Menace and also our views on The Witcher Season 1 completely for free, which is like half an hour of free content. So go check that out. Aside from that, guys, coming up, I've got an episode recorded with Matthew B. Lloyd, who is part of the Comics in Motion family, which is where my Star Wars podcast airs every Saturday. And he does a show every other Monday called Classic Comics, where he delves into the golden age of comics. So like the 40s and 50s and I think the 60s of comics. So like the origins of Captain America, some of the really old school characters like the original Human Torch that's completely different to Johnny Storm, who is in the Fantastic Four. There's lots of really interesting connections and things. He's done an episode about Catman, which is quite interesting. The original Batman the original Batman, who is different from the Batman we know and love. There's loads of cool things that he tackles that I honestly had no idea about, and he's very, very intelligent. And what was great is when we spoke for Genuine Chit-Chat, we spoke for about 2 hours about old school comics and Star Wars, and there's a Star Wars newspaper strip that was going on after A New Hope got released, when it was just called Star Wars, before Empire Strikes Back was released. And it's a newspaper strip, so every day in the newspaper you'd get a little bit more of the story, and I think on Sundays you'd get like a slightly different story in some ways. But in one of the panels you've got Boba Fett teaching Luke Skywalker how to ski, and I just think that's one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life, which maybe that goes to show what my humor's like. But it's so funny watching, you've got Boba Fett trying to teach Luke Skywalker how to ski. It's bizarre, but it is brilliant, and it's just off the walls balmy. So we speak about that and loads of other crazy things that are in Legends, that some of them are actually in canon now, which is quite bizarre. Like I think it's Jackson Rabbit, who's like a humanoid 5 foot tall rabbit, but is like a person wearing like a spacesuit. And he's like a main character in some of the Star Wars comics. He's now in Star Wars Adventures, actually, but there's lots of crazy weirdness in Star Wars. So really interesting speaking to Matt. And then Tom wants to come on the show again, so the gentleman who's going to be coming on next week, he's going to come on the show again to kind of hone in a bit more, I think, on sort of moral questions and sort of a lot of the sort of theoretical questioning and things like that, like concept of good and evil and heaven and hell and life and all these sorts of other things. So that should be quite a fun conversation. And I've also got a few things in the pipeline of, like, as members of the Comics in Motion family I want to have on the show. There's other people who've reached out to me that I'm kind of organising with them, having them on the show. There's a couple of people involved with Star Wars that I'm going to have on the show. There's loads of bits and pieces sort of all around that I want to kind of connect the dots for. But there's also, like, there's some artists that I'm going to reach out to have on the show. And, you know, usually with me, it's just kind of on the day what I sort of fancy. And then I'll just kind of send out like 10 emails to different people asking if they want to come on the show. And a lot of them want to come on. So that's really what you can expect. If you haven't already checked out my Star Wars show, please go check that out. Whether or not you like Star Wars loads or not that much, it's really good to kind of get a better peripheral knowledge and understanding of, well, the expanded content. I try and explain them, and I go through the comics and whatnot in a way that if you've never read the comics, you get the narrative, you get the connections, you get more information on certain characters and things. Like I did the Age of Resistance villains comics recently, so I just basically gave loads of backstory on Kylo Ren, General Hux, Supreme Leader Snoke, and Phasma. And I also went through the one-shot comics that they're involved with. You don't need to read the comics at all. I try and structure the show so you don't have to read the comics, so I give you a vague idea of what happens, but I also give loads of information about the back characters and some of the planets they may visit in the comics. But also, if you have read the comics, a lot of people like reading the comics and then listening to the show because it then kind of reinforces what they've just read and brings some context to things that they may have missed. So that's my Star Wars show that you can tell I'm very passionate about, and I love it. And obviously I've got this show, I've got my Afterthoughts show on Patreon, and as well as that I've been on several guesting shows, like for the 20th Century Geek I was on Desert Island Comics, so I spoke about 3 Star Wars comics I'd like to take if I got stuck on a desert island. One of them was a C-3PO comic and 2 are Darth Vader comics, so that was quite fun. And also me and Megan did a massive Batman retrospective where we watched like loads of Batman films and spoke to Scott about them. And also very recently me and Megan were on the Comics in Motion feed talking about the finale of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So if you want to hit, it's very spoilery, so you're going to have to make sure you watch that episode on Disney Plus or whatever before listening. But myself, Megan, and Chris Phelps of the TV Movie Show and one of the podfathers of Comics in Motion, we all talk about the finale and what we thought of it and the series in general and stuff. So if you fancy that, go check over Comics in Motion. I think the episode's about an hour long or so. And also, I can't remember if we spoke about it when recording or not recording, but me, Megan, and Chris are planning on doing a Fast and Furious retrospective, because I've seen all the Fast and Furious movies, bar Hobbs and Shaw and Tokyo Drift. I've seen them all once, semi-recently, whereas Megan has never seen any of them, and Chris loves them. So I thought it would be quite fun for us to sort of watch maybe like 3, not at a time, but, you know, watch 3, do an episode about it, watch the next 3, do an episode about it, because I always like hearing, even if Megan doesn't like a film, I really like hearing her criticisms about them, because they're just, a lot of the time they're just really funny, especially with Spider-Man 3. So yeah, that's kind of what's in the pipeline going forward. And there are lots of other things, but obviously I don't like to talk about the things that aren't exactly cemented, that I don't have recorded. But on Patreon I do put up guest lists, even though I didn't do one this month, so I need to put up a guest list for May to confirm to everyone what I'm doing over the next month or so. But anyway, I've been rambling on now for like 10 minutes in this outro. So I do apologise for that, guys. Really hope you guys enjoy this. If you don't want to support the show financially or anything like that on Patreon, please leave a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this show. Tell your friends about the show, share on social media. And that is perfect, you know, spreading the show or supporting financially. Either or, I'm happy for. Some of you guys do both, and I completely adore each and every one of you who do that, but I do see a lot of you guys who do just share the show and stuff, and it means the world to me, honestly. This little show that I've been doing for a few years now, just basically by myself, wanting to talk to people I find interesting, and I'm just happy that so many people will listen to it and enjoy it and find it useful. So thank you guys for listening, as always, especially when I ramble so much at the end here. It is a nightmare. But yeah, appreciate you guys listening as always, and I'll speak to you guys next week.